Welcome back to the We Are CC podcast. Thank you everyone for joining us for episode 6. I'm Tom Crown, chosen to do the intro because of my velvety, smooth voice. Joined today by the guy who quit his day job to play full-time, play to earn in the metaverse, Mr. Poppy. Oz, who was a wee lass of 2 or 3 when the first Bitcoin was mined. And the man of mystery, the master of disaster, the degen of DeFi, Mr. Mister. Just wanted to remind everyone, check us out at weareccpodcast.buzzsprout.com to catch up on our previous episodes, and I think we're ready to go, Poppy.
Yes, sir, Tom. I think the favorite part of my week is hearing you do that intro. Starting off this week, I think we wanted to talk about Russia and Ukraine, which surprises no one. I think it's been dominating the news cycles. It's been certainly dominating the forefront of all the investors across many markets, on their minds. So just to kind of recap, earlier in the week, Russia invaded Ukraine, and they're in the middle of a conflict. And this is, from what I understand, the largest ground conflict in Europe since the 1940s. A lot of people, obviously, war of any sort is a little bit scary. When you have other macroeconomic factors at play that we've talked about on earlier calls, things like record high inflation, adding to that stress, obviously it's even scarier. First thing, we don't want to dip into politics here, but we do want to say that, if you have any family or friends in that region, really hope that they're out of harm's way, that they're doing okay. Some very interesting developments that rose out of this conflict so far that are very relevant to crypto folks. First thing is Ukraine. Let's talk about how they've been asking for donations via crypto. I think this is kind of what we've always said would happen, right? In a roundabout way.
It's I was streaming earlier and I had to talk about this topic, and it's a rough one. It's no one wants war, no one wants the pain associated with any of this, and it feels wrong on many levels to even kind of enjoy the. Oh God, I have to be so careful to even say this. Is this is really the time where cryptocurrency's value, its fundamental value, shines, and it sucks that it has to be something so negative. But this is what it's for. When countries are under pressure or under censorship, cryptocurrency can shine. It's an environment for it. And, we're seeing that right now with Ukraine. I think they've gotten millions of dollars now. That has a multiple fold effect too. The citizens are able to, have some of this cryptocurrency, and in the worst case scenario, say Ukraine is occupied, the citizens would still have access to that value and still be able to operate outside of any kind of regime change. So it's so hard to talk about, but it is kind of like what we've been waiting for in many ways.
Yeah, it's kind of that catalyst when you talk about real world value. I know that there was a post, I saw someone talking about how they had to flee their home, and they couldn't access any of the money that they had in the bank. The only thing that they had access to was their crypto investments that they had on their smartphone, which is pretty wild when you think about, even if you're not talking crypto, just, anything these days is basically on your smartphone, like Apple Pay, right? You can set up all of the payments. You don't need to carry cards. You don't even need a brick and mortar bank anymore. But crypto amplifies that. They were just talking about how grateful they were for the fact that they've been active in DeFi for the past couple years, and that they had some holdings there that they could fall back onto if they needed it. I think earlier, Oz, you were talking about this, and you had mentioned a number. I think you were looking at how much had been donated to Ukraine in particular. Do you remember that number?
Earlier on, it was around 5 to 6 million, and I think it's now moved up to around 7 million. And I think Gavin's Wood, he's also said he's going to personally donate 5 million worth of DOT. So I'm sure there'll be a lot more money flowing in the coming weeks.
One of the projects I'm in, I'm not going to name it. It's an NFT/DAO project, but they also put up a proposal. Now, there was, different opinions, as tends to be with kind of politically sensitive things. But it's just kind of interesting that within that DAO infrastructure, that DeFi infrastructure, that someone said, hey, because this protocol and this project is democratically managed, any of us can put this up for a vote. So I think we should donate some funds to the Ukraine effort. I'm going to put up this proposal because I am a DAO member. I own governance tokens. I put that up, and they engaged in a democratic discussion about, hey, should we donate some of our project's funds to them? And I just thought that was such a great example, again, of the kind of benefit that crypto brings you. Otherwise, I mean, if you were at a traditional bank, right, that would never even be an option. It's not like you could call up the bank president and say, hey, sir, I think you should donate some money to whatever ABC, cause. You wouldn't even get him on the phone probably unless you had, 7 figures in his bank. So,
it is kind of, I hate again to relish in the positive, but I'm going to try to stay positive anyway. It's kind of nice to see crypto cast in a positive light here, fundraising, sending money to people in need. Without a doubt, we're going to see this used against crypto at some point. It may not be today or tomorrow, but down the road, at some point, they're going to vilify it, as everyone seems to do. But it's awesome to know that we're actually doing good, because so often we get cast in a bad light.
You're right. It's very easy. The media loves kind of negative news, FUD. But speaking of the negative, so one of the other things that come out of this is very interesting. So for those who don't know what SWIFT is, I guess you guys can correct me if I misspeak, but I think SWIFT is, in very simple terms, is the global financial network that everything transacts over, that all the banks transact over. Would that be accurate?
I believe it has to do with international settlement, like bulk kind of lines of credit in a way. But yeah, I think that's the easy explanation.
Easy. Yeah. I'm certainly not an expert, but what is interesting about SWIFT is that a lot of countries are looking at putting sanctions on Russia. Having access to SWIFT is obviously critical for any nation, because that's how you are going to exchange funds with other countries to conduct trade as is normal, right? For a healthy economy.
Yeah, getting taken off of SWIFT would be an immediate, like we talk about news kind of being macro and having a macro influence, but something like that would have an immediate impact on an economy. Material flows, it would just halt like the next day, because the country in question wouldn't be able to kind of take out lines of credit with others and continue the normal kind of exchanging that they do.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a big hit.
It's I think the word would be unprecedented. I'm not a historian. I'm not a financial guru, but I believe from what I've read that nothing of this caliber has ever been done before, right?
I believe 2012, Iran may have been taken off of SWIFT, but that's it's 10 years ago. That certainly isn't a country like Russia. Unprecedented, I think, is still the correct. Even though it's happened once, I think it's still correct.
Yeah. And what makes Russia interesting? The world's 11th, so almost top 10, largest economy, supplier of 1/6 of all commodities globally, supplies 40% of Europe's gas. And obviously, it's a very sensitive topic. And again, we don't want to get into the politics. I know that war tends to bring out a lot of heated opinions, and right, we're not getting into that, right? We just want to talk the financials, and in that, when you have a macroeconomic picture right now where inflation's super high, and one of the biggest issues with that inflation is energy costs. Now to have the country that supplies half of Europe's gas sanctioned and potentially have that impacted, that's only going to amplify that inflation concern. What do we think that means for crypto? Because what we were expecting initially before this kicked off was that, all eyes were on the U.S. Fed, right? And they were looking at tapering, kind of cutting back the juice that they've been feeding to the markets. And I know I haven't hit you up yet. What do you think's going to happen now? Do you think that maybe the Fed might rethink what their initial plans were?
I think they have to, actually. Just as you were talking about the impact on inflation, the expected rate hikes that the Fed are going to do. Hiking rates into a stable environment, quote unquote, is one thing, but hiking that same I don't want to be quoted here, but I think they wanted to raise it 50 bips in March. That may change, is what I think. So, from a technical perspective on what the Fed is going to do, I would imagine they're definitely reassessing that rate hike, at the very least, assessing the magnitude of the rate hike. But I think the impact on crypto, that's such a hard one, man, because there's kind of two ways to think about it. The correlation, if the correlation to equities and traditional markets holds, then it's bad news. If everything works out and we're really able to take advantage of the bullish macro picture, for example, on Bitcoin, and I know I say this a lot, but the underlying supply, the consolidation that we're seeing by whales and institutions, and sure, there are a good fair amount of bearish indicators right now, but if you zoom out enough, it is still bull. It is still set up for a bull run. And I think what could kick that off is finally being able to decouple, finally realize that narrative of crypto slash Bitcoin slash the blue chips being safe havens or inflation hedges. I'd really love to see that come true. But to be honest, my gut is telling me that I think whatever the markets do, we'll be following. And best case scenario, maybe we rebuff that wider market structure and see crypto overperforming. I think there is a good chance of that, but I don't want to, that's my gut right now.
When we talked about it originally, I remember saying something like, I have a feeling the Fed's going to end up walking this back. Little did I know why. But certainly it does not seem like the conditions where we're going to stop printing money and we're going to like pull back on spending.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe this is calculated, maybe it's not, especially with the timing. You talk about natural gas, it's winter time, we're kind of in the peak cold month. I don't see a way that the Fed stays on schedule in March. I just don't see it.
Yeah, and to your point, I mean, not to turn this into the We Are Crypto Conspiracy podcast, but the manipulation potential out there is real, I think. Again, just gut feeling, just talking here. No reason to believe that.
Yeah, I think a lot of eyes and a lot of governments, especially in Europe and North America, are looking at those fuel costs, because that's one of the things that to most, average citizens, it's one of the most obvious indicators of where inflation is. You drive to work, you see the price of gas, and you think, boy, that is up a lot in the past year.
And what about the trickle-down effect of that, right? Is you got the energy costs associated with your personal consumption, but then that impacts the supply chain. That's going to impact how much the people...
Literally everything.
Literally everything, exactly. And it's so weird for that just one thing, that price of gas, well, the price of oil, right? Energy. It's like the base cost of everything, right? Indeed.
Because you have to move it, you have to produce it.
Mm-hmm.
It's, probably should be considered one of the biggest inflation factors, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Just to kind of close off the whole inflation versus traditional markets versus crypto, I think the one thing that may help with the decoupling narrative for crypto is really the adoption. And we're seeing Ukraine lean heavily on crypto for fundraising. And I think that's, as Tom was saying, that's kind of a silver lining, that it can be used positively in that way. And I think there are different narratives out there on crypto adoption, but certainly with Russia, as we're saying, being cut out from SWIFT, they will be falling back on crypto. They will be going hard on digital assets. We don't want to get political here, regardless of your stance on that. That still counts as adoption, right? That still counts as mainstream adoption at a sovereign level, really. And I think that's really interesting. Definitely going to be following that closely.
In my head, when I think of crypto, I keep thinking back. I'm going to do a little movie reference. In the movie Terminator 2 with Arnold Schwarzenegger, true legend there, the mother of John Connor is talking about how the Terminator is unstoppable. No matter what, he's always there. If something attacks John Connor, the Terminator's there. Nothing's going to stop him. And I think of Bitcoin the same way, and really a lot of the crypto space, right? But Bitcoin obviously is the one we're kind of focused on, because that's the predominant one. You look back at the protests in Canada recently, when all other systems failed, common citizens realized, hey, what can I fall back to that works? And they fell back to Bitcoin, and they took donations in Bitcoin. Same thing in Ukraine. When all else fails, what can I fall back to? It wasn't traditional finance. It wasn't banks. It wasn't Apple Pay. It wasn't PayPal. It was cryptocurrency. And on that same note, what people are thinking, we talked about SWIFT, getting denied access to SWIFT with a few exceptions. You know, it's kind of funny how the countries do this. We're gonna sanction Russia, but we're going to leave a few exceptions because we can't afford to block them entirely, right? There's things we need from them. There's thoughts that Russia may fall back to crypto. So, you know, good, bad, indifferent, people all over the world are starting to realize that it's there, and it's more than just meme coins and metaverse and whatever else, right? It has real, very genuine, important value to the common people.
Unique value, even. Think about what else during this kind of conflict. You know, we're seeing Ukraine being helped by crypto, and blockchain is a tool, and tools can be used by anybody. We're not forced to like what they do with it, but, you know, both sides of this conflict may resort to cryptocurrency. You know, Russia with these sanctions, it would be a pipe dream to think they're going to go full on crypto, but I think it would be naive to say they won't in any capacity. Of course they will. If they're cut off from SWIFT, of course they'll have some capacity in crypto. It's just so crypto-esque where two conflicting sides of an issue have a benefit. And I think we see that in a lot of aspects of crypto. Avoiding the politics, but I pointed out a lot is crypto doesn't seem unique to any single ideology. It really is kind of the great joiner. I see people from every political spectrum find value in crypto, and it's something very unique. And that unique value is definitely standing out right now, and potentially is the most bullish environment it's ever seen.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there are conflicting narratives out there, and just kind of stepping back from that conflict of narrative, it is still adoption. And I think, you know, you can't champion for a decentralized system that is permissionless, that is accessible, then turn around and, you know, not want to bring in or not allow a player to come into this space because maybe the narrative that they're under doesn't kind of jive with a particular worldview, perhaps. But it's really interesting, I think, because it's not just the SWIFT system, right? It's the fact that these oligarchs, it's their assets are being targeted now. It's their real estate, it's their mansions, their jets, their yachts, right? And in that kind of an environment, if I had that kind of money and my super yacht was about to be seized, I would be looking at the rest of my assets and just thinking to myself, well, how can I protect that from getting seized? You marry that up with the shift and maybe the fallback plan to rely on digital assets. And I think there's going to be something there. Not saying anything about good or bad, should or not should, but I do believe that that's going to be a serious driver in adoption out there.
It's almost like there is no good or bad when it comes to crypto. It's blind. It's one of the, it has no preference. It treats everyone equally. There is no favoritism. There's no selection. It's simply a system.
Right. So let's let the media and Twitter, fight out the narratives.
Decide for us, yeah.
But the Bitcoins will be there for everyone, right?
So what you're saying, it's unstoppable, like a Terminator.
Unstoppable.
I was going to look up the exact quote from Linda Hamilton, who I just absolutely love as an actress. Her role in that movie is amazing. Anyways, one thing I think I wanted to kind of cap off this particular segment on. And so one of the things we try to do on this podcast is when we talk about the market, we try to keep it kind of timeless, right? We don't want to go too deep into the current price action, the current markets, because if you listen to this in a few months, you're not going to care. Crypto is so volatile that whatever it looks like today, in a few months, it'll look completely different. But I think it's worth noting the cycle for the entire cycle right now, Tom, the pattern, which we've talked about, you've talked about on your streams, I've talked about on Reddit, in Discord. This is a major deviation as far as the type of pattern that Bitcoin is painting on a high time frame. We're talking monthly charts. Would I dare say that it's potentially high time frame bullish, whereas in previous cycles like 2018, 2014, it was a bearish, once we peaked, it was a very bearish pattern and very strong downtrend, right?
Absolutely. I've been saying that for months now, is this doesn't really look like anything we've seen. And that isn't necessarily good or bad. I actually have been speculating. We've been waiting for a big catalyst is what I've been saying. And I was thinking physical ETF. Maybe I've been totally wrong.
Well, that's the dream, right? We've been saying that for years, I think. For the folks that may not understand what we mean by that, can you kind of elaborate a little bit on what we mean by waiting on a physical ETF?
Just going to put me on the spot like that. No. An ETF is an exchange traded fund. And I don't know the complexities of them either, but the easiest way to understand it would be look at something like Grayscale, where it's almost an isolated market. And so this isolated market is regulated in a way where large institutional players are not only legally allowed, but have some kind of protections in investing in an asset. And so the difference would be the physical part is the ETF would actually have to buy and hold the Bitcoin instead of kind of trading paper on top or trading IOUs. And it has been the golden goose for a long time because it does require a huge amount of Bitcoin to be bought and basically for all purposes held indefinitely. Now it is getting traded back and forth, but it isn't really leaving that isolated pool. And so it'd be very bullish, and we have been waiting for this forever. It blows my mind that we are actually potentially seeing Russia cut off from SWIFT before a physical ETF is approved in the US. To me, that seems really backwards. Obviously, that's wasn't by design, but I think it's in the US's best interest to get that physical ETF approved before anyone cut off from SWIFT might lean into the strengths of crypto.
Speaking of Grayscale, this is actually a really good segue. So one, ETF, there are ETFs. There's ETFs around the world in different countries. What is lacking is the US having a physical ETF, a spot-based ETF. And so what everyone's been hoping for many years is Grayscale as a company, that Grayscale would be approved to become an ETF. Why is that? Well, Grayscale is the largest holder of Bitcoins in the world, as far as I know, right? There may be some kind of secretive whale, or maybe the counts aren't recent, but I'm just going to quiz you guys. Don't look at the notes. Who here wants to guess? We'll start with you, Tom. How many Bitcoins do you think Grayscale has right now?
I'm going to embarrass myself. 120,000.
All right. What about you, Oz?
I'm going to say 500,000.
All right. And what about you, Mister?
I'm just going to split the difference. I think, 250,000.
All right. Well, the closest one was Oz, but 643,000 Bitcoins.
Oh, wow.
643,000.
Wow.
Just let that sink in.
I embarrassed myself.
Not as many as Satoshi, of course. I think he has like double that number. But as far as I know, that's the largest holder of Bitcoins in the world. And it's just an absolutely phenomenal number. They've been at it since 2013. They are one of the earlier movers in the space, that they started going big, obviously, when Bitcoin was a lot cheaper. But one of the challenges that they have, because they're not an ETF, there's a lot of funds that can't invest in them. And there's more risks with investing in them. So what would be great is if, say, like your 401k or something else, normal investor. People like to throw the word boomer out there, right? A lot of boomers, actually, the boomer generation holds the vast amount of wealth still within the system. So by converting Grayscale or any other fund into an ETF, it makes it more accessible to those old school, more traditional type of investors that crypto's really been waiting for a long time, right? We have seen the speculative end of traditional investors come in, like venture capitalists. We've seen a lot of those. What we haven't seen is that kind of mass adoption from the just general day-to-day, boomer investor. and I don't mean boomer as an insult. I think I'm the oldest guy in the call, right?
Poppy, as a boomer, would you? I'm just kidding. Yeah, you hit that point that I missed actually is I think the biggest advantage of an ETF is that it would allow the smooth on-ramp of, say, like pension funds, 401k, that kind of asset, kind of the invisible coming out of your paycheck to be invested partly into physical Bitcoin instead of, say, IOUs or something. And that is a game changer. And there's trillions of dollars out there that can't touch Bitcoin until it has an ETF like that. So definitely.
Yeah.
And you guys, I'm going to be a little bit of the contrarian on this one. Sorry. Just to clarify, also, we're talking about an ETF, a Bitcoin spot ETF in U.S. markets, right?
Correct.
Maybe that's a little bit of our bias there, sure, but it is the deepest liquidity equity markets out there, right? The thing that worries me, though, is an approval of an ETF in this current global macroeconomic, can I say shit show that we're in right now?
Justified.
I see a problem with that getting approved if we do start to see some serious adoption from, say, whoever may have been sanctioned out of the traditional finance system, right? I don't see the regulators being like, oh, okay, well, on the one hand, we want to make it as hard as possible for folks to interact with the financial system, and then on the other hand, say, but we should do an ETF for Bitcoin that's going to allow anybody, even sanctioned entities, to really take advantage of Bitcoin liquidity markets. Yeah, that I think there's that one wrinkle.
Yep. That's why they needed to do it first.
Yeah,
they
maybe.
needed to beat this Swift cutoff, and I guess there's still time, right? I don't think officially they've been cut off. Maybe I'm wrong. Last I read, it was still just like kind of sponsored by many countries. I'm not up to news on the last like few hours or something. God, that would be so amazing to just see a last second like, no, we're gonna push it through, and then we're gonna make Russia buy the top.
There you go. And if it's grayscale, and I think I'm probably wrong a lot actually, but yeah, I do believe Grayscale's intent that they've broadcast is to eventually transition into an ETF on their BTC holdings. Right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
In fact, if you guys out there listening in the future and now, even if there's no ETF in the future, go to, I don't know where else to find it. I think it's grayscale.com/petition, but go to their Twitter and they have a link, basically Grayscale, that like easily allows you to write your senator or write the SEC, but write your senators too, and describe the importance of an ETF. They've asked for public comment recently.
Crypto should be, going forward, it should be one of the traits or the values that you look for in the politicians that you guys elect, not just in the US, but anywhere, also abroad. I think recent events.
Vote orange.
Yeah, vote orange. For me, it is definitely one of the top issues. I mean, there's obviously, everyone has their own personal values and things that are important to them. So you'll have to weigh that against everything else that's important to you. But to me, financial freedom, financial independence, the ability to have more finite control of my financial future is pretty darn important. Not just because I'm like 3 times older than Oz, but
I'll derail us again. I know we have other topics. I'll derail us. I am now officially, I'll like declare it here, a single issue voter, period. I will back anyone who backs crypto. I'm just putting that out there into the universe.
Tom, maybe you should run for president. I would vote for you.
Shh. Soon.
Oh, you're not old enough yet.
Soon.
Is that the Crown Poppy ticket? I'd vote
the
for
Crown
that.
Poppy ticket. Yeah, let's go. I'm ready.
It's got a good ring. Good ring to it.
You might have to dox yourself for that. But so we are going to segue a little bit. Up until now, it's been pretty serious talk. Let's talk about something that's a little more fun. And I'm going to post something into the chat for you gentlemen. I want you to keep in mind what your first feelings are when you see this. I'm going to post a couple pictures. These, would you pay...
I saw Big Man Oz's picture.
Would you
Penguin throwing the hearts.
would you pay almost $10,000 for these? And I'll tell the people on listening. I posted pictures of an NFT project called Pixelmon.
Oh, wow.
And not only was Pixelmon trading within the crypto space this week, it was trending on Twitter. The term 3ETH was trending. And it was trending because people paid 3ETH for a Dutch auction of these NFTs for a very extremely hyped NFT project, which as a Pokemon fan myself, I'll admit, I definitely checked it out because I love Pokemon. I love games inspired by Pokemon. And so a lot of people obviously were really excited about this. But then the way it worked was they paid their 3ETH and they got it had to hatch. This is becoming very popular in NFTs right now. You buy something and it needs a period of time before it hatches, which to me just says that's trying to kind of trick you into buying more because you're not sure if you got the rare one.
Sounds like a loot box.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Yes, it's like a loot box. It's like the lottery. So,
Poppy, can I like verbally describe what we're looking at for these?
You can do
people out
that,
there?
and then Mr. X I think is going to try to share the images on Reddit and Discord.
There's what looks like a terribly drawn. I can't even tell if that's a bear or a monkey. Then there's like maybe a Mario lizard. I don't know. And then
I think it's a zombie.
And then it looks like there's a blue puddle under some grass, and this is all extremely pixelated. And I think a kindergartner probably was hired off of Fiverr to create these. That's my take.
I don't mean to laugh. On one hand, I do sympathize because I didn't buy any, right? I sat in the Pixelmon Discord earlier this week, guys. I sat in on the AMAs because I knew that this was going to be something that people were following this week and we were going to talk about it. And I really do sympathize. This is a lesson, honestly. And this is the same for traditional crypto. I call it traditional crypto and NFTs because NFTs really are their own thing. In traditional crypto, you got to get burned a few times to get inspired, to get motivated, to learn things. Everyone on this call, we've been burned, and we talked about it in the earlier podcast, and most of us are very active analysts. Obviously, Tom Crown, 2021 Analyst of the Year. We got there because we had to get our hands slapped a few times.
Destroyed. Take
this. If you picked up Pixelmon and you're really upset that you spent 3 ETH and they're now down to, I think, like 0.3 ETH, whole 48 hours later, you can do better, guys. You got to do your own research.
Are you sure, man? That one, it looks like maybe some blue pixels under grass. Like that looks rare.
It does look pretty good.
I did want to pick.
What is it?
I did want to pick some up for meme value because they kind of are like cute in a funny way.
They're not cute. Guys out there listening, they're not cute. There's nothing cute about them.
They're creepy.
They're creepy. They're weirdly drawn. They look like a bad acid trip. That's really what they look like.
Yeah.
Yeah, they look like it was made by an AI that just hasn't been trained. Like maybe just the early AI or something for me.
Trained for murder.
No. There's layers to this, which we won't get into, but there was layers to this that the project lead had apparently they had made big promises of like, we got a massive team and we got a bunch of artists working on this. And it turns out I don't want to say Fiverr specifically, which is Fiverr is where you go to just hire someone, like here's $100 to give me some artwork. Right. It sounds like
they'd be better off having done that. It's so bad. It's so bad.
Yeah.
I'm sorry if you're listening and you bought one. I think Poppy's right. This is your trial by fire.
It is. But also the 3 ETH price should have been a warning. This is a trend I've seen a lot in the past quarter in the NFT space, which is kind of jacking up that price of the initial mint. Let's be real, guys. Come on. I mean, if you're in the NFT space and you're charging people 3 ETH for an initial mint, boy, you better be giving me some really gorgeous art, really gorgeous NFT, whatever it might be, just something phenomenal. Because that's in the current market, that's what, $9,000? $9,000. That's a used car right there. Like, come on. You guys can do better. But also to investors, you guys, you can do better as well. You got to do your research. You got to look for these warning signs. I won't go into a mint for anything that's even an ETH. It's got to be under an ETH for me to mint. And that's just me talking. I mean, it's not financial advice. It's just kind of my rule, which saves me from getting burned that bad. There was a guy that did, I think, like 36 mints, and I hope it works out for him. The project still has a massive treasury, so they could pull this out, hire the right team, a studio to finish the development. But the last thing I want to say on this one that we can talk about, so the project lead went on a buying spree, and he did this while his community was kind of burning down and capitulating. He did like a 400 ETH buying spree, and he was buying like CryptoPunks and Bored Apes and all the good stuff. He was buying that while his own NFT project was kind of imploding a little bit. So anyways, it's a bad look, but I honestly, truly, there's enough treasury there to definitely fix things. So best of luck to you guys. That was a wild week.
Do we know how old the creator was? Because I can't get away from it. It just looks like a kindergartner made it.
He thought a 5-year-old made those.
Yeah, like the 5-year-old would crap on those. Like a 5-year-old can outdraw whatever that is.
Well, honestly, yeah, kids these days, I say kids, like 12, 13, the kind of digital art that they're learning to do in school or, just for fun would definitely rival this or better. But yeah, it turns out that the founder, he did dox himself and he's like 20 or 21, something like that.
Yeah, that adds up.
So it's not to say, obviously Oz is the young one in this group. And Oz, I got the world of respect for you, man. I think you're a phenomenal analyst. But there are some things like managing, multi-million-dollar project of kind of high complexity. You need a lot of experience to do something like that. And maybe that was the mistake, right? Maybe he got in a little bit too deep.
I think it worked out for him, though, right? He seems like it worked out for him.
He got us some Bored Apes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if he does the right thing, right? If he does the right thing and he learns from this, he licks his wounds and he says, you know what? I got the money. We screwed up. Maybe I need to hire a few people with a little bit more experience than me to help kind of drive the project forward. That would be the right answer.
Sadly, he's not going to be the one with wounds, though, right? It's going to be the people potentially. I don't know what they're going for now, but he doesn't seem to have wounds. He's sitting on a pile of gold and apes and such.
Yeah. I think he's going to try to do the right thing. I think he's going to try to fix what it's kind of like No Man's Sky. If you guys play video games, a game launched a few years ago called No Man's Sky that kind of did the same thing. They promised this massive, almost infinite galaxy that you could explore, and it launched, and you couldn't even do multiplayer at launch, and it was the biggest hyped part of the game. And it took about 2 years for the developers. They apologized profusely. They went back to the drawing board. They put a ton more development into it, like 2 more years, no lie. And now it's a great game. It really is. And I think that's a fair comparison, right? This is the opportunity they have. So if you think that they may pull it together, could be a good buying opportunity. Anyways, yeah. So that was a fun week.
Can you imagine
Pixelmon.
if, what is the company? I'm blanking here on the company's name. But the real Pokemon, if they had done NFTs, I would buy one in a heartbeat. And I've never bought I bought one NFT ever for like $20.
Man, I think that's the golden grail of NFTs right there.
Niantic.
Yeah. Well, they definitely do Pokemon Go. Yeah, I'm not sure whoever, yeah.
Oh yeah, you're right. That's Pokemon Go.
But whoever works with Nintendo, yeah, whoever owns the intellectual property to Pokemon, when they do an NFT, that will be something else.
I will FOMO so hard, so irresponsibly.
Yeah, even if you're not a Pokemon
I want a
fan,
Charizard, a holographic Charizard.
Those are the peak collectible, really. So I guess we'll see. That's TBD. So the final topic that we want to talk about going into this podcast is, I did want to say one final note on that. We didn't say, Pixelmon earned $70 million from that mint. It's wild. I really have nothing to add to that. I just hope that they use that 70 million to develop something phenomenal. The final topic was, and this is going to be an ongoing piece, we're going to talk about personalities in the space. One of the things I've noticed with a lot of crypto traders is they kind of live in a bubble, right? They might join Reddit, they might join Discord communities, whatever they join, right? They live in that bubble, and maybe they don't really spend a lot of time out of it understanding what the larger market influencers are. And I don't mean influencers as someone on TikTok or someone on YouTube. Apologies, Sam. But I mean the people that are tossing around billions of dollars and really driving the market, right? That kind of stuff. And I think it's really important to understand that. I think it's really important to know who's out there. And because you want to follow these people, you want to see what they're saying. Because people, in the first one I'm going to talk about is going to be Michael Saylor, right? These kind of people, the decisions that they make and the influence that they have is going to impact the direction of crypto. Michael Saylor is the first one that I put in our notes here. And I think he's a very fascinating character. He was a guy that survived the dot-com boom. He's seen companies tank. He's seen companies soar. And one thing he did a few years back was he pivoted basically his entire company's kind of top focus into just investing in Bitcoin. And not just investing in it, but trying to convince the rest of the corporate space, other big companies, Fortune 500s, to divest some of their holdings into Bitcoin, because he's looking at it from the long-term picture. He's saying, hey, I think that forget about inflation hedge. This is a store of value. Over time, Bitcoin's going to continue to go up. You know, it may have volatility on the shorter time frame, but in the long time frame, this is money. Right now, his company owns 125,051 Bitcoins. Also, Tom, I don't know, did he invent the laser eyes? Was he the laser eyes guys? I don't know where that even came from, but I think he popularized it.
I don't know. I don't even remember. I don't remember, but he's maybe the definition of diamond hands, all in Bitcoin. I love Saylor. Saylor, if you're listening, hit me up, man. I want to chat.
I love the guy. I'm not even a Bitcoin maxi. He's probably the king of maxis in my opinion. And I know there's some people who take offense at it, because I know there's some other folks in the space like Max Kaiser that think that that title belongs to them. But the way Michael Saylor has driven some of the corporate interest in Bitcoin over the past 2 years is phenomenal. I mean, he's hosted conferences for other corporate leadership like CEOs, CFOs, just to kind of give them a guide, a strategy for investing in crypto.
As a maxi, it's Saylor or Jack. It's Dorsey or Saylor. One AB. That's
Jack,
my mind.
Yeah, Jack Dorsey, and we're going to talk.
Dorsey's all in.
I'm right there with you, boys. Let's go.
We're going to talk about him in a minute. Yeah, but Michael Saylor. So the thing about Michael Saylor too is every dip, everyone waits, because every dip, Michael Saylor likes to announce, I just bought, another 10,000 Bitcoin or something. And he just does this and he does this. And everyone keeps waiting like, wow, what if it dips below his average buy-in? Well, his average buy-in right now is $29,000. I think maybe getting close to 30. And what I always like to remind people of is these guys are billionaires. They got billions of dollars to play with. Two, no matter how smart you are, they have access to a lot of resources that you will never have, a lot of money you'll never have, a lot of analysis that you'll never have. And so for him to edge up his average buy-in to $29,000 to me is very significant, especially when you see what's the price done so far this cycle, which is it's respected that level perfectly, right? What was it in July, Tom? Maybe we hit like 28, 29. Depends on what exchange you're on, I guess.
Yeah, just under.
Yeah, and at the time, I think his average buy-in was probably like mid-20s. Now he's kept buying, so it's gone up a little bit.
People ask me that all the time. It's like, what happens if it goes under Saylor's average?
Just buy more.
Dude, this guy is a maxi, and as a maxi, I think I can speak to this, that's when we actually buy. They're not paper-handed retail, it's just silly to me. It's like people think like Saylor's gonna freak out if it goes like $1 under his average. Are you joking? It's probably where they're reserving their capital for. I am.
I think it would be very damaging to his personal and MicroStrategy's brand if they were to start paper handing out their Bitcoin.
But the whole thing would fall apart.
I mean, they've shifted their entire business model. Yeah, the whole thing would fall apart. But I mean, the business reputation is based on being a thought leader and helping institutions, navigate the regulatory waters to allocate, capital into cryptocurrencies, into Bitcoin. And if he shows any sort of weakness in that belief, I think that is a huge tarnish on on the MicroStrategy brand. So I don't see that happening just because of that. But yeah, you're right. If it dips, then he's holding and buying more, right?
He said his outlook's decades. So I think a brief or even not brief trip below his average, I think, is unlikely to dissuade him.
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah, Oz, when you're my age, you're gonna go one day. You're
You
gonna
can be so rich.
you're gonna put the kids to sleep. You're gonna go into Google. You're gonna Google this old podcast from 20 years ago, and you're gonna be like, "Oh wow, remember when we were talking about Bitcoin at just 30 something $1,000?"
Now it's at $1 million.
And he's going to turn off his super yacht helicopter.
Exactly. That I hope he invites me to.
Please.
Of course.
Thank you.
Free entry for all.
Yeah. So we're talking about. Let's go into the next personality. So Michael Saylor won. You can follow him on Twitter. And I'm not doing this to shill. The guy doesn't need chills. Trust me, he has massive amounts of followers. I'm saying follow him because you want to understand the perspective of these guys that have more money and resources than you. Because whatever they're doing, chances are it's more informed and more analyzed than anything you're doing. That's not to say that they're always right?
Guaranteed.
Of course, they could be wrong.
It's more informed and more analyzed and more thought out and more planned. Yes, guaranteed.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's kind of been my approach, right? My personal favorite, and we talked about Grayscale earlier, one of my favorite things to do is watch what Grayscale does. And for a portion of my portfolio, I replicate that, right? If you're going to have 600 or whatever, 630,000 Bitcoins, I figure you might know one or two things about investing. We're going to talk briefly. This isn't on the list, but we should talk about CZ. CZ actually is one of the bigger personalities in the crypto space. And so CZ, that's his nickname. I think that's what he goes by for most people. But
no one knows his real name.
Well, yeah, conspiracy theory.
I made that up. Yeah, I don't know.
But
I just know by CZ.
I think his real name something, and I apologize if I say this wrong, but Changpeng Zhao. So he's basically the face of Binance, and Binance is the world's largest centralized exchange, massively huge, bigger than any other. I don't even know who's number two anymore, but
Coinbase.
Yeah, okay, that's fair.
Maybe FTX. I don't know.
Yeah. But
Coinbase.
he's massively rich. I mean, it's hard to say how much money some of these guys have in the crypto space. But two, he basically runs Binance. And Binance, ton of money in Binance and flowing through Binance. You definitely want to watch what he says. I mean, a lot of his stuff these days. So Binance got in a little bit of trouble in the past few years with regulators because they were kind of pushing the limits on what they should do in terms of a centralized exchange. Even perhaps, this isn't me saying that they definitely did, so please don't sue me. Perhaps even encouraging like using VPNs to log into Binance to trade to get around your country's, limits. So these days he spends about half his time schmoozing with regulators. Another half of the time he does occasionally drop some good tidbits. But in any case, I always encourage people to follow him as well. The next one, though, Tom Crown, I think this is probably your boy, Jack Dorsey. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about Jack. I've been talking too much.
There's no such thing, Poppy. You talk as much as you want. Jack's just a champion. Just a champion of Bitcoin. Is what I wish I could be, and what I aim to be and strive to be. Is he, was the CEO of one of the largest, biggest social medias in the world, and steps down to focus on the real path, which is Bitcoin, and through his company Square, and they are building out the Bitcoin infrastructure, and the man's doing the Lord's work.
The Jack is the man 100%. I don't know if Tom is the biggest Jack Dorsey fan. I suppose I was called Elon Musk's biggest fan, but I would probably, Tom, you and I might have to thumb wrestle for that title.
Okay.
Of biggest fan.
Tic-tac-toe.
Well, let's go, man. It's on. But his company Block is, I think, really, they don't. I'm not going to curse again. They don't care about. They don't seem to care about anything other than pushing innovation into turning Bitcoin into a usable, actual currency. Right. And they're one of the first to really integrate and scale Lightning Network into the into the wallet that's attached to, is it the Cash App or is there a new one from Block?
Strike.
Strike, right? The new
Strike.
one from under the Block brand now, right?
Jack Mahler. The other Jack.
Yeah, those guys are they're really pushing the boundaries of, I think, what Bitcoin represents right now, because really, we talk about it as store of value, we talk about it as a hard currency at some points, but really as a payment method, it's really not there, right? And they're focused on getting that into the mainstream. What better way to get that into the mainstream than through apps that potentially hundreds of millions of people use? I think that's the way.
It's unbelievable what he's done. And I can only imagine what he's going to do in the next few years.
Dude, talking to Jack, I've been lucky enough, just kind of living where I live, and the networking opportunities that are here. I've had the chance on multiple occasions to not just meet, but really talk to him. And number one, he is much smaller than you might think. He is a very small dude, and his personality is just way. He's a super cool guy, but the way he talks, it's almost like just entrancing. You're just looking at him, the words coming out of his mouth. For me personally, it's always been, yes, I believe you. Where can I live in your house and do
How
chores
can I
for you?
all in on
How
what
can
you're
I all
saying?
in into
Yes.
into
How
Jack
can I
Dorsey?
leverage all in what you're saying?
So Jack, if you're listening to this, sir, contact me. You might need to get a restraining order out on this
Just
gentleman, Mister. I'm
Get
a
it
little
early.
worried.
Just do it. Just do it.
Isn't that why
Yeah,
we're
me
at on,
too.
guys? Makes it easy.
He's a little addicted.
No, Jack has the resources. He'll find you.
I'm so jealous of you that you've spoken
So-
to Jack.
Yeah, actually, that is pretty cool.
I'm
You know,
starstruck
that-
hearing that.
Oh, I got stories, man.
The most famous person I met in my life was Bill Clinton,
That's pretty famous.
I mean, he was the president.
which he was kind of famous.
Kind of famous.
Yeah, when I was in the army, I got lucky enough to sit down at a dinner with him, and he spilled his Coke all over himself, and that's all I remember.
Wow.
Like 20 years ago. You posted up his net worth, and now, wow, I'm really impressed. $6 billion. I figure that's what Oz is going to be at, right? Oz, I'm expecting you, man. By the time you hit Jack's
Mid
age.
30.
Yeah, I just ape into everything anyone tells me. I mean, if he has enough money, he can definitely swing his weight around, and he can get stuff to actually get put in place. So he's a cool guy.
So we're almost at the hour. We got a few minutes here. I did want to move on to just a couple final personas. We can squeeze them in here. This one probably caught everyone on the call off guard a little bit. This is going back into the annuals of Bitcoin history. So hopefully you guys remember the Spice Girls. Oz, I got to ask you, at your age.
I don't know who they are.
What? Yeah, Oz. Spice Girls, feedback, go.
I've heard of them. I've never listened to them.
Yeah, do you have a favorite?
Which is the best Spice Girl?
I only know the one that's married to David Beckham.
Of course you do.
I think that's a Spice Girl.
That's a good one.
Yes, Victoria Beckham. Yes.
Yeah. That's the only one I've heard of. And then Mel B, she's also quite famous.
Of course, yeah, MLB. So, yeah, Victoria was my favorite. I'm not going to lie. Victoria, if you're listening to this, you want to talk crypto stuff, please hit me up. But it turns out, and I learned this week, Mel B, she was the first mainstream musician to sell music for Bitcoins. And she did this in 2013, 2014 timeframe, back when the only other person that was thinking about this at the time, it was making headlines because it was kind of unusual at the time. People were like, what? Bitcoin at that time was very much kind of on the fringe. Snoop Dogg almost released an album selling it for Bitcoin at the time, and I guess he thought better of it, so he didn't, but it did make headlines that he was thinking about it. But Mel B did. And so kudos to her for being that forward thinking.
She was also my favorite Spice.
Yeah, she was my number two. But Yeah.
Oh wait, no, Mel C. I was thinking Sporty. I don't know. I'm too old now. I forget.
Your memory's going. Your memory's going, Tom
Yeah.
Crown. But I will never forget. I will never forget my favorites. So then the last person we're going to talk about, and this guy kind of embodies both the good and the bad. He's like a hero and a villain. He's become such a polarizing character in the crypto space that we could not talk about him. Is that maybe too many negatives? So Elon Musk is one of those guys that on one hand, I respect him phenomenally because he is pushing that bar as far as what, in so many industries and so many technologies, and what's possible. But on the other hand, he does rub people the wrong way sometimes. So Elon Musk over the past 2 years has at times been a major catalyst. I remember when he bought, was it 2021, spring of 2021, he kind of triggered this massive FOMO event where he bought $1 billion of Bitcoin. Not for him, but for Tesla. And Tesla, obviously, if you guys didn't follow the stock market over the past year through 2021, Tesla was one of the phenomenal performers. People made fortunes off of Tesla. So I remember waking up that day and Bitcoin was just rocketing. I mean, you could watch the daily candle just flying. And I remember telling the wife, I was so like, wow, the Elon Musk guy just bought $1 billion of Bitcoin. It's pretty wild. And she was like, oh, okay, that's cool. To me, it was one of those kind of major events in crypto, right? And that's what pushed Bitcoin through that resistance. Yeah, and Tom, do you remember? I'm trying to remember what the actual, like, what was the resistance? Was it the 2018 resistance that he blew through, or was it the 40K, right?
God, Elon. I love and I hate you. Now, Elon, I think it was around 30, kind of close to where it was now. Around, like, I want to say 34,000. This was like late January, I think, was like the Elon candle for Bitcoin. And man, yeah. I love and I hate him. He was like my idol for years. And then he started becoming more of a public figure and I started not liking him as much. And they started talking about crypto and then I loved him again. And they started like talking about Doge instead of Bitcoin and I hated him again. And then now he has deployed Starlink to help Ukraine. So I love him again. Elon, stop making me bipolar. That's like my only comment.
Yeah. One of the interesting things this week was the government of Ukraine said that their normal landline terrestrial internet was down, that they wanted internet. And they tweeted, hey, Elon, can you help me, help us realign some of your Starlinks to give us service? And Elon was like, I got you. They should be there now. And we'll send some more.
Done that day. Isn't that amazing?
That's just incredible. I mean, you go back 10 years, the only people that could have done that would have been governments, right? That would be like a national strategic level asset that you would have to reassign to that particular area. Now you tweet as a government head and a CEO says, I got you, man. Here you go. That's wild, man. That is wild. I mean, I know this is not crypto, but that's just crazy.
I think that deserves some recognition. That's like hero status or Batman status.
Like if anyone could be Batman, yeah, it could be. Elon, if you're listening to this, start training like judo and kung fu and everything that Batman knows.
Yep. And start fight crime on the streets.
Dude, that would be so cool. I'm so down. I'll help you design the suit. I don't know. We'll think of something. Bats are kind of weird, so maybe not.
Yeah, not bats.
But
T-Rex.
But so Tesla, though, when he made that investment, they bought 42,000 Bitcoins. I don't know if that was a nod to 420. I'm not going to say it was, but there's a distinct chance it was. So I just want to highlight Tesla. They sold, I think, 10% of that. They've kept the rest. Mm-hmm. They're still massive holders of Bitcoin.
Yes. The liquidity test. Quote.
Yeah, that seemed a little weird
quote
to me.
unquote.
Hey, it worked. I mean, didn't crash the market.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was their excuse, if anyone wonders. People watch that and they kept watching to see. So some point in 2021, Elon came out and said Bitcoin's bad for the environment. Okay, that's fine. He owns Tesla, obviously, and he owns other environmentally focused companies that are into green energy. So it kind of makes sense he would say that.
They made a profit by selling their carbon taxes. So logically, maybe he wanted to sell those carbon taxes to Bitcoin miners.
Mm-hmm.
Conspiracy. Well, for another day.
Perhaps, yeah. But Tom Crown, I think, and gentlemen, I think we might be at the end of the hour. So is it time for the Q&A piece?
Yeah, thanks for joining us for episode 6 of the We Are CC podcast. CC podcast. CC podcast. CC podcast. CC podcast.